One of the things that we mentioned yesterday was about a mu'uvas lo yuchol liskoin v'chesroin lo yuchol lihimonai, something that's a sin that can't be corrected. And the first example, or one of the examples, the example Reb Shimon ben Manasseh gave for this verse in Ecclesiastes is a person who has prohibited relations and causes a mamzer to be born. Now, Rashi learned that because he brought a puzzle, he brought someone puzzle into the world, and there is a remembrance for his sin, therefore his sin is not erased with tshuva. Lefichach ein avonosav nimcholin b'tshuva. This Rashi is on page 9a. It's about 7 lines from the top of the page. Ein avonosav nimcholkin b'tshuva. They don't get erased with tshuva. Tosfos doesn't seem to say that same wording. He seems to word it differently. He talks about the embarrassment, that his embarrassment is recognizable. Shahamamzer nira la'olam. He doesn't mention specifically the concept of if his tshuva is accepted or not. Now, Tosfos is a little vague, but the Tosfos Harash spells it out a lot more clear. Tosfos Harash, and I'll just read it for you. It's a little short little piece here. He says that he brings Rashi, Hirish Rashi Shehevi Psule Puzzle B'Yisrael V'Havalei Z'Lezichrein. There is a remembrance that he brought into the world a sin. Therefore, it is not erased with tshuva. This is his quoting Rashi. In the Tosfos Harash, he says, V'loi nehira, and it doesn't seem correct. There is nothing that stands in front of tshuva, in front of someone who wants to do tshuva. Rather, it's called mu'uvas lo yuchal liskoin because his embarrassment is remembered forever, because people say this mamzer came from so-and-so who had relations with this prohibited person. And so the Tosfos Harash pretty much spells it out that he's disagreeing with Rashi. And the reason why he's disagreeing is because there is no such thing that will limit tshuva. Tshuva will always work. Now, the interesting thing is that the Gemara in Yevamos does bring the difference between someone who is dishonest with his midos, with his scale, which was a common way for people to cheat others, was they would weigh produce or items in the store, and they would sell you stuff, but they would use the wrong weight. They would have false weights, and that would be a way of cheating other people. So when they would buy, they would use one weight, and when they would sell, they would use a different weight, and both of them could be false, and ultimately they would gain. So the Gemara in Yevamos mentions that arayos is efsher b'takana. Arayos is not as bad of a sin as cheating someone with false weights, because arayos means having a prohibited relations. That you could do tshuva. And Rashi over here in Yevamos says, as long as you didn't give birth to a mamzer, as long as you didn't cause a mamzer to come to the world, all you got to do is stop your forbidden relations and have charata, have remorse, and you did tshuva. But midos, when it comes to weights, gozal es harabim, you are someone who stole from the public, and ve'ena yodea lemi yachzir, you have no idea of who to return to. You have thousands of people went through your store. You don't know, who to return to and how much. And even though we have a rule that what do you do if you stole from a group of people? Yasakin bahem tzorchei rabim. So use the money for public needs. There is such an option to spend the money. Let's say they need a communal bathhouse. So you stole, let's say, $50,000 from the community. So use the $50,000, donate it towards the public bathhouse, and you've helped out the community with the money you stole from them. You gave it back to them, so to speak. So maybe that should be considered atonement. You did tshuva. I'm quoting you a Gemara in Yevamos, page 21, and we're going through the Rashi there that talks about the difference between a sin of arayos, of having forbidden relations, compared to a sin of false weights. And the Gemara there says that a sin of false weights you can't do tshuva for, but the sin of forbidden relations you could do tshuva. And Rashi says you could do tshuva for forbidden relations as long as you did not cause a mamzer to be born. And what about atonement for forbidden weights? So the Gemara seems to imply that you cannot do tshuva when you stole from the public. That's the way the understanding. You stole from the community. How do you do tshuva? You don't know who you stole from. You stole from so many different people. So Rashi asks, but why don't you we have a rule that you should just give to the community, use the money for a tzorchei rabim. So you stole $50,000, use that $50,000 towards the community. So Rashi answers, lav tshuva ma'al yasam. That's not a proper tshuva. That's a partial tshuva, but it's not a full-fledged tshuva. It's not a proper. It's not a complete. It's not a really strong tshuva. That's it's the minimal or something that you could do, but you're not fully getting atonement. But if you sinned with forbidden relations and you have regret, that you can actually do tshuva for, and it would be accepted. So what I'm bringing from Rashi over here in Yevamos is that Rashi seems to hold that even though we always know that you could do tshuva for all sins, but if a person had forbidden relations and caused the mamzer to be born, Rashi seems to continue his view from Chagiga, and he, along the same lines as he says in Chagiga, says in Yevamos that there are cases where it doesn't really work, your tshuva, and that would be if a mamzer is born, then your tshuva doesn't really work. Now, Tosfos Harosh in Chagiga said that there's nothing that stands in place of tshuva, and you for sure could do tshuva. The only thing is, there is the fact that the mamzer is walking around, and everyone, people know, people will if they ever see him and they know who his parents are, it's like the public will know about this sin of yours, and so it's an embarrassing situation. It's something that you can't get rid of because it's right in front of people's eyes. But not that you can't do tshuva. You can do tshuva, but it's something that you can't fix because, unfortunately, once the public, knows about it and it's in front of their eyes, they're not really forgetting about it so fast. Now the Tosfos Harosh in Yevamos on the other Gemara, he says, even if you gave birth to a mamzer, he argues on Rashi over there in Yevamos, in the Tosfos Harosh in Yevamos, in this other tractate, he says that even if you gave birth to a mamzer, and even though we say it's something you can't fix up, this is someone who came on you can't fix it to remove the mamzer from the world, but tshuva will always help. So he adds this point that even a mamzer tshuva will help. You could do tshuva. So it seems to be an argument between the Tosfos Harosh and Rashi if a person could do tshuva once a mamzer is born. And now we have a lot of people who want to talk. Let's start with Mordechai.
Yes, we're upstate, like in upstate New York, like half of the year, and summer or two ago, well, there was this place that sold soft ice cream. You put it in a cup, and then they weighed on the scale, and so they took out an ad that they discovered that the scale was off.
Really?
Right.
This is a kosher place?
Yes.
Wow, that's so interesting. So they took out an ad, said the scale was off, and
Right.
they're sorry. And are they offering free ice cream to anyone who ever bought ice cream?
I forget what the other details were, but I just remember that they took out an ad saying that their scale was off.
That's an interesting one. Thank you for sharing that. That's rare to find. Interesting. They wanted to do tshuva. Look at that. Okay. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say, but we learned that you cannot accept donations for money that was earned by a sin. And here they say, yes, make a big donation for the public.
Maybe because it's their money. I'm not sure. I have to look it up. That's a good question. Interesting. But maybe because it's their money and you're giving it back to them, that it would be acceptable.
Who is them?
The community. In other words, it's the community who bought in your store. And
I'm sure not the whole community is buying in the store. So,
no,
a few people from the community, the community.
Right, it's from some of the people from the community. So you're basically returning to them their money that they spent in some way.
Then you should put an ad like the ice cream store. Make a donation to the public.
See, I don't know how easy it is.
If you steal $1,000 from 10 people, and then you give $1,000 to 10,000 people, it's not the same. You didn't return it to them, that the ones that got hurt.
Okay, that's an interesting thought. I'm not sure if it's such a strong question because the community bathhouse costs $100,000 to build, and you're donating $50,000 from money that was taken from the community, and so the people that you got money from are benefiting.
It wasn't taken from the community. It was taken from a few people that do business with you.
Okay, but ultimately, they're all those people that you took money from are, benefiting from the bathhouse. Again, I'm not sure. You're asking an interesting question. We have to look up what the source is. We're about using money that's ill-gained money. Does it stay prohibited? What are the rules?
You're letting him get by with something that he shouldn't, as far as I'm concerned.
So it's
he
not
helped a lot
exactly.
of people. He's not going to help those people only. So I don't know.
Right. So we're not saying that his tshuva is accepted. The question you're asking is not that why should his tshuva be accepted. It's more, are you allowed to do anything with that money?
Why
what
is
should
it not
be done?
Accepted from some other people? They say, no, don't give donations. Right. Don't accept donations from somebody that got it in the wrong way.
So we have to see what that refers to. Okay, yeah, we'll have to look that up. Okay. Good point, Ben. Yes, Robert.
There are 2 points. One is, to me, this is sort of like what the root is for a clash a class action suit against somebody. People lost money, but you don't give it back to them. You provide it for the greater whole as a penalty for cheating on a business or overcharging whatever. People don't get their $1.98 back, but what they do is they get a sum money that benefits everybody as a penalty. So maybe that's the genesis of why we have that within civil law. But what's more important to me is that when you create a mamzer, you create irreparable harm to someone, and for how many generations are there mamzerim in that family, and how can you ask for or justify some tshuva as a part of that? So that's, again, within the argument is a mamzer is going to be a mamzer for how many generations, and because of that, they have a mark on their head. It's like the A for adultery, in the scarlet letter. But that's part of everybody knowing that they're a mamzer, and you can't repair that.
So that's a very powerful point you're making, that it stays forever. In other words, if the mamzer has children, all the children, grandchildren, great forever, they will be mamzerim, right, unless it becomes forgotten, the mamzerus from the world. But otherwise, it's basically a major problem. There are many cases where the Rabbanim try to find some loophole to annul the initial marriage. Like, for example, a woman commits adultery with someone. So if she gets pregnant, the child is going to be a mamzer. But if the rabbis could somehow figure out how her initial marriage was not a real marriage, so then what they'll end up doing is causing her affair not to be really considered an affair, because her initial marriage was not a marriage. She wasn't a married woman. So what they might try to do is find out, were the witnesses at the wedding, were they really kosher witnesses? Was her marriage a real kosher marriage? Is there a way we can annul that marriage retroactively? In other words, and say that marriage wasn't a marriage, and ultimately help out the child that came from this affair to be considered not a mom. We don't want him to be considered a mamzer. So there are numerous situations where they'll try. Another example is the woman was given a divorce, but it wasn't or she never got her get. That's a very common case. Women don't get their get; they get a legal divorce. They didn't get a get, and then they get married to someone else, and then the child is considered a mamzer because they never got their get from the first. This is a very common situation, and there you have.
But that's been a contemporary issue, because when the husband refuses to give the woman a get, then I forget what there's a name for that. And aguna, right? She's a lost woman or rejected, whatever.
She's tied. She's tied down. She can't get married.
She's a chained woman. That's it. Chained. Right. But the other thing is, the rationale is that maybe the marriage was not consummated. So consequently, does the marriage matter if they didn't perform his obligatory relationship with his wife or together? So again, I don't know what you're saying.
They never had relations.
Consummated it right after the ceremony.
Well, that's not that common, that they never even had relations once, and there's already a divorce before the wedding. There might be such a case, but I don't think that's the common aguna case.
No, that's not a common aguna. I'm just saying
there could be a case once in a million
that the marriage wasn't consummated. That's all. Just hypothetically thinking about
right, but that wouldn't exempt too many people. There wouldn't be enough situations like that to find the. We got to find more of a solid loophole, and that would apply to more cases. So there are numerous cases where the divorce was not given. That's a very big problem. If you have a Jewish woman not receiving her get from her husband, and a lot of times not because the husband refuses, a lot of times it's because she just doesn't consider herself religious, so she doesn't think it's so important. And in the end, what ends up happening is that the child from her future husband, who she marries and thinks she's doing the right thing, the child ends up being a mamzer.
Yeah,
And
but
this is the big.
Right. There was I remember some years ago in Israel, there was this cause célèbre where the man repeatedly refused, and there was some court ruling that essentially allowed her to divorce him. And I don't remember what it was, but I know that was a big issue in Israel maybe a dozen years ago, if anybody remembers any of that.
Because some people were arrested for beating up husbands.
Yeah, there was such a case in America where people were beating up men who refused to give gets. Which
That's in New York.
Which maybe wasn't so bad if they did, It's so sometimes, because here in America, it's hard to force. In Israel, they do have methods of forcing the husband to give the get.
But here in the United States, Rabbi, they sent him to jail.
Right?
I know, but it's it's not like they were hurting innocent people. They were doing work that's necessary sometimes. But
I think finding a way to whitewash a sin is not the right way to do it either.
What are you referring to?
The fact is one, and then you try to whitewash it by finding a reason why the marriage was not right or whatever.
So we're not removing the sin. What they're doing is making the person trying to find a way that the child will not be considered a mamzer. It's the greatest avos yisrael you could have, is to help out a person that they shouldn't be legally considered a mamzer. Again, finding a way according to Torah. This is not some non-correct thing. They're trying to find, according to Torah, is there some way of considering the marriage that maybe there was some issue with it. But it would need to be done according to big bezdins deal with this to try to find ways. A lot of times they can't, but sometimes they can. Sometimes they can find ways of considering that the child is not a mamzer, and that's a tremendous avos yisrael to help out a person, to help out generations of people that they shouldn't be considered mamzerim.
Rabbi,
terrible title for someone. Yes, Ezra.
Suppose that you have a mamzer. He can marry a convert.
Yeah, but the kids will still be mamzers. So it's a big problem. The kids would still be mamzers.
Rabbi, one of the things that I believe occurs occasionally is that there's a suffix about the status of, let's say, a witness at a chasana. Those can be very problematic and to a thing.
Right. Well, a big problem that we have sometimes is figuring out if a witness is really a kosher witness or not, because there's so many. In other words, to figure out if it's, or if a conversion is considered a kosher conversion as well. It's not always so simple to judge, because like, for example, the common understanding is that a reform conversion doesn't involve acceptance of all the mitzvahs, but a conservative conversion is a questionable conversion, according to many rabbis, because there might have been acceptance of the mitzvahs, there might not have been acceptance of the mitzvahs. So it creates a lot of problems when it comes to number one, marriage, witnesses, and so on. All these type of things creates a big problem, which ends up being an issue sometimes of a mamzer, because of this whole thing. Was the woman even Jewish in the first place? Was she, was her conversion considered a proper conversion? And it's based on the fact, was the rabbi that did it, did he himself does he himself keep the Torah? If he's a conservative rabbi, he might be considered someone who follows the Torah, but he might not, because in conservative, there's conservadox and conservaform. You have ones that are more leaning towards orthodox and more leaning towards reform, and they do keep changing some of the rules in conservative Judaism. A lot of times, they came out with new laws about the gay marriages at some point, and they came out with other things. So, it's a little unclear what their rabbi. So if their rabbi does a conversion on someone, it could be questionable if it's a kosher conversion or if it's not a kosher conversion, and that would basically cause ultimately issues of potential children being born that they are, either the children might not be Jewish, or if they are Jewish and the woman didn't get a get from before, there could be issues of mamzerus, so it basically has a lot of ramifications. Or if they're a witness, if the person is a witness at another person's wedding, would that other wedding be a full-fledged marriage because they were not Jewish? So it creates a lot of problems, and a lot of times we have suffix. A lot of times we do another conversion out of a suffix. Like I know a friend of mine who his wife, before he got married, they told her she has to convert. My friend was shocked. He was marrying a regular, full-fledged from birth girl, and turned out that they looked into the grandmother's conversion was a questionable conversion, and because of that, they said, you know what, the whole family should just go to mikveh now, and we'll do a conversion on the whole family. And they converted the whole family as a suffix. It's called a questionable conversion. It wasn't a definite conversion. It was a possible need for a conversion. And so the woman told me, she says, you know what, I'm better than everyone else. I'm for sure Jewish. You people, maybe there's a question, she said. But me, I did it just in case we weren't Jewish. We did it.
She has a certificate. My father always tells me there was the inquiring photographer for the Daily News. He used to go around asking people questions. They had their picture with 3-4 people to answer. And the question of the day was, how do you know you're normal? And this guy reached into his pocket and said, I just left Bellevue and here's my certificate. Yeah. Nishka Mamza.
Just a quick question, not to belabor the point, but does that affect the wording of the ketubah?
Does it affect the wording of the ketubah?
Because she's a convert.
There is. Yeah, they do write things a little differently for, right. There is a different wording for convert. Okay, so so we find this discussion here about doing tshuva, and the fact that on the one hand we have many statements in the Talmud that says there's nothing that stands before tshuva, and on the other hand we do find that seems like there might be different levels of tshuva, and like Rashi over here and Rashi and Yubamas both seem to say that if a mamzer is born, a real tshuva can't really be done. It's not a complete tshuva once a mamzer is born. What is interesting is there is somewhere in the Chayvas Halvavas, in the Shar HaTshuva, where the Chayvas Halvavas mentions that if a person reaches such a level of tshuva, the mamzer will actually pass away, and then they will actually get full atonement, which is a very I guess advanced level of tshuva where Hashem, so to speak, removes the blemish from the world, and the person is able to do tshuva, complete tshuva, maybe. So in any event, we that's the discussion here about between Rashi and Tosfos, it seems like. And the Mishnah then mentioned about a person who didn't bring the Chagiga on the first day. He's able to bring it on the subsequent days of the holiday, and even the last day by Shmini Atzeres, he could even bring it then. if the holiday passed and you didn't bring it, then we have this uvas lo yuchal liskoin chesron lo yuchal imanos. We have this statement, this verse from Ecclesiastes that there are some things that can't be fixed. And we had Rav Shimon ben Manasseh talk about the case of a mamzer that was born, and we have Rav Shimon ben Yochai who says someone who went away from the Torah. We discussed that yesterday. He's a Talmud Chacham, starts off straight, ends off sinning, and either he just stops studying Torah, so he loses time and he can't make up that time, or a Talmud Chacham that leaves and basically regrets his good deeds. At least that's the way we explained one of the explanations connecting Reb Shimon ben Yochai from our Gemara to Reb Shimon ben Yochai in the Gemara Kedushin, and then the Gemara the Gemara wanted to know what's the source that if you missed out on the first day, that you could even make up on Shmini Atzeres. Gemara said we have a Gzeira Shava Atzeres. Basically, it says Atzeres by the 7th day of Pesach, and it says Atzeres by the 8th day of Sukkot. So just like the 7th day of Pesach, you could bring a Chagiga makeup. You could make up for missing it on the first day of Sukkot of Pesach, or the first days of Pesach. You can make it up on the 7th. So the same thing is the Atzeres of Sukkot would also be an option of a makeup. So that's the source. It's a Rabbi Yochanan says that's the name of Rabbi Shmuel, that it says that you have this Atzeres. The only problem is that Gemara asks, you could ask a question. The 7th day of Pesach is not really different than the earlier days of Pesach, but Shmini Atzeres is different than the other days of Sukkot. There are differences, and therefore you could say that maybe you can't really compare these two holidays. And therefore, you have to say that the verse, the only way you could learn one from the other is if the actual word that we're learning from is extra. It's called mufna. It's vacant. It's available to teach from, to study, to teach a lesson from. So the Gemara says, yeah, it's taka vacant. It's mufna. It's available to be learned from because we already have a pasuk that says loisasa malacha, and so it says atzeres, which also means don't do work. Loisasa malacha means don't do work. It doesn't need to say it a second time. It must be telling you to learn from, to have a teaching from the 7th day of Pesach to the 8th day of Sukkot. And so therefore we'll be able to learn one from the other. And then we brought a brisa that said a similar teaching, but from a different source. And what was the source? It brings a source, that you celebrate it for 7 days, and you might think that you could celebrate every single day. In other words, bring a chagiga every day, but it says oisai, which is singular, so it sounds like it's only one day. So that day you celebrate, but you don't celebrate also. But what it does say, you should celebrate for 7 days. So my answer is, yeah, 7 days is tashlumin, is a makeup. But what happens if you miss, and you didn't do it the 7th, can you do it on Shmini Atzeres also? So the Gemara says, you have a verse that says the 7th month. It implies like the whole 7th month, but you might think maybe you could actually bring, do a makeup the whole 7th month. 7th month is Tishrei, by the way. The whole month of Tishrei is called the month, the Chodesh Hashvi, because we start counting. In last week's parsha, it says HaChodesh Hazel Lochem Reish Chodoshim. In Parshas Boy, it says Nisan is the first of the months. So if you start from Nisan or your Sivan, Tammuz of Elul, that's the first 6 months. It starting with Nisan. Tishrei is the 7th month. So the 7th month, it says B'Chodesh Hashvi, you celebrate this holiday of Sukkot, and it implies like the whole 7th month, maybe you could celebrate and do the Chagiga sacrifice. You could bring this Chagiga offering. And the Gemara says that maybe you could do it the whole 7th month. It says, Oisoi, that day you celebrate, but not outside of the holiday. So what we see from there is that you could celebrate on any of the days that are the holidays. In other words, you could celebrate the Chagiga, you bring the sacrifice, the Chagiga, on the 7 days of Sukkot and the Shmini Atzeres on the 8th day, because that's what the Chodesh Hashvi'i is basically adding, teaching us that you could do one extra day, and which it would include a day of a holiday, and that would include Shmini Atzeres. Okay, so we basically have 2 sources that Shmini Atzeres is acceptable for the Chagiga sacrifice. We have 2 sources. Either we're learning it from a Gezerah Shava, a word that it says by Pesach and by Sukkot, and that word teaches us Shmini Atzeres should also be acceptable, or we're learning it from B'chodesh Hashvi'i that it seems to add an additional day, that the additional day should be should give us an option to include the day of Shmini Atzeres. Now, the Gemara mentioned a very interesting argument of what this concept of Tashlumin is. What is this concept of a makeup? We saw it in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said you didn't bring on the first day, you could do all the other days, and including Shmini Atzeres. You didn't bring the Chagiga sacrifice on the first day, no problem. You could make it up. You could do a makeup. But what is the mechanism? What is the rule of that? How does that work? How does that policy work of doing a makeup? So the Gemara has an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya. We learned it yesterday, what this makeup is, and we mentioned Rashi. Now, the simple point of this argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya would involve the following case. The case is a person is lame on the first day of Sukkot, and he gets healed on the 2nd day of Sukkot. Is he going to be obligated in bringing the Chagiga sacrifice? That's the case. And this is going to be an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya. So we know the case where they're going to argue. Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that he is exempt. You were sick on the first day, you were lame. The 2nd day of Sukkot is a makeup for the first day. And if on the first day you were not obligated in bringing the Chagiga sacrifice, guess what? Your exemption is absolute. You're totally free from bringing this sacrifice. You're totally free. You missed the first day was your obligation was to bring it on the first day. You didn't have that obligation because you were lame. So you were exempt. The 2nd day you got healed. Okay, you got healed on the 2nd day. No problem. If your healing was on the 2nd day, you're still exempt. Because the main obligation was on the first day. If your main obligation was on the first day, so then the 2nd day is just the makeup for the first. You don't need a makeup. You don't need to make it up. You're free. That's Rabbi Yochanan's way. Rabbi Shaya learns differently. Rabbi Shaya is a little confusing, and I showed you in Rashi how Rashi seems to complicate it a little. Like there seems to be an easy way of learning this, and Rashi doesn't seem to want to go with that. The simple way of learning this would be that Rabbi Shaya holds that every day is an obligation, and if you didn't bring it the first day, you got to bring it the 2nd day. You didn't bring it the 2nd day. If you're sick on the first day, So you got to do this. The second day, you're obligated because each day is its own obligation, right? That would be a simple way of learning. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, day one is the obligation. All the other days are called makeups. And if you're exempt on day one, you're exempt to all the makeups because you don't make up something you never had to do in the first place. You only make up something that you needed to do and you missed out. But if you didn't need to do it in the first place, you're exempt. You don't do makeups either. So if you were exempt on the first day, Rabbi Yochanan says you don't do it on any of the days because makeups you don't need a makeup. A makeup is for someone who is responsible, who is obligated, and who missed out. You didn't miss out. You were exempt. If you were lame on the first day, you were exempt. You don't need to do a makeup, even if you're all better on the second day. There's no need for a makeup. That's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Shaya is the more complicated one. Rabbi Shaya says that no, if you were exempt on the first day because you were lame, but now you're better on the second day, you have to bring it. So the simple way of understanding Rabbi Shaya is that second day and the third day and the fourth day are not makeups. They are intrinsically obligated in bringing a chagiga. As long as you bring it once during the holiday, you're free. You don't have to bring it the other days. You bring it one time during the holiday, you're free. But the makeup, it's really not about makeups. It's about being obligated. You're obligated on this day on the second day. So if you were lame on the first day, you're able to bring it on the second day. Your obligation kicks in now on the second day, right? That would be the simple way of learning. Now, Rashi didn't want to learn that way, and maybe we're going to talk about maybe a possible reason why Rashi didn't want to learn that way. But Rashi says, it's not that Rabbi Shaya holds all the days are obligatory days. Rabbi Shaya says, no. The earliest day, any day that you're able to bring it, that's the obligation. That's when you need to bring it. So, for example, if you were lame on the first day, you're free, you're exempt. But the second day, you got better. This is the first time that you're eligible to bring this chagiga because now you're better. It's the second day of Sukkot, and now you're able to bring it. So today, on the second day of Sukkot, is your obligation. Tomorrow, you will be considered a makeup for today. If you don't bring it today, tomorrow you can do a makeup. And the next day, you can also do a makeup for. So according to Rabbi Shaya, the makeup it's a makeup of of the first time you're able to bring it. The first time you're fit to bring it would be a better word. So your obligation falls on the first time you're fit to bring it, and then all the other subsequent days are makeups for that day. But each day could be a day that you're obligated, but whatever day is the first day that you're fit is the day you're obligated, and all the other days are makeups for that day. So again, what ends up happening between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya as the case where they're both going to argue is if a person is lame on the first day and he is healed on the second day, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's exempt. Why? Because he doesn't need a makeup because he was exempt on the first day. And the first day is where the obligation is. And if you're exempt on the obligation, you don't have to do a makeup. According to Rabbi Shaya, when is the obligation? Well, the first day you were exempt. The second day you were fit to bring it. That day you become obligated. It's a day of obligation because Rabbi Shaya holds that the first time you're fit to bring it would be a day that you're obligated to bring it. And the subsequent days would be makeup. So if you miss bringing it on the second day, you would be obligated to bring it as a makeup on the third day or on the fourth day. So you have to bring it on the second day. And if you miss the second day, you can bring it on all those makeups. So the difference would be if you have to bring it or not, bring the Chagiga sacrifice. This would be a difference with Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shaya. Now, why Rashi wants to learn this way? Again, I think I should read it in Rashi one more time. It was a little complicated, the Rashi, but I think I should read it to you inside. Kulan tashlumin zelozeh. That Rashi is it's a little past the halfway point of the page, maybe about 30 lines up from the bottom of the page. The last word on the line in Rashi. If you have Rashi, I don't know if everyone has Rashi. It's definitely in the art scroll, they have Rashi. I don't know if the Steinsaltz, if any of you have the Koran, I don't know if it has Rashi translation. It might, but if you don't have it, it's only going to just be a minute, so don't worry. Where the last word on the line is Kulan Tashlumen Zelozeh. They are all makeups for each other. So Rashi says, Ein l'cha yoim bahem she'ein chayvasei tluya by ba'atzman. There is no day in them that doesn't have an obligation of its own day. Lemi shalai nira b'yamim shalafanav, for someone who wasn't fit on the earlier days. So in other words, any of those days that you weren't fit on in other words, any of the days that you weren't fit to bring it that were earlier, so this day will be an obligatory day. The Yom Rishon Shehu Nira, of the first day that it's fit, lahavi, to bring it, Iker Lidi day, that will be the main one. The Yomim Shalacharav Tashlumin Loy, and the days that are subsequent to it will be a makeup for that day. So what Rashi says is that the first day you're fit to bring it is the day that you are going to be obligated in bringing it. And the future days after that are all makeups for that day. Rabbi Yochanan did not learn this way. This is Rabbi Shaya. Rabbi Shaya said you weren't fit on the first day, but you're fit on the second day. The second day becomes your day of obligation. And the third day becomes the makeup day. And the fourth day is a makeup day, and a fifth day. So they're all tashlumin to any of the days that you become fit to bring it. If you become fit on the second day, that's the day of your obligation. That's the way Rashi learns. And the reason why he learns that way is possibly because the wording of Rabbi Shaya is tashlumin. He uses the concept of tashlumin, makeups. He doesn't use the term chiyuvim. He uses the term tashlumin. So Rashi wants to fit the fact that they're makeups for each other, and all he changes is what day is the main obligation. Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Shaya says the main obligation is the first day that you're fit to bring it. And the first day you're fit to bring it is the day that you got healed from being lame. That would be maybe the second day of Sukkot. And so Rabbi Shaya would say the days subsequent to that would be tashlumin, would be makeups. But Rashi doesn't want to learn that they're all considered obligatory days, because the wording of Rabbi Shaya is that they're all tashlumin. Another maybe source for Rashi is the fact that our Mishnah starts off, the way the Mishnah starts off is Mishaloi Chag b'Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Choygeg es Kol Haregel b'Yom Tov Ha'achron Shel Chag. That it starts off implying that the whole concept is a makeup, that you're really supposed to bring it at the earliest day possible. And it seems that if you didn't, then you do the rest, but not like the obligation is on all of them. It's like the first day possible. So Rabbi Yochanan says the first day possible means the first day, and any other days would only be makeups. And Rabbi Shaya says, no, it's the first day possible, not the first day of the holiday. You didn't bring it on the first day of the holiday. That's for a regular person is the first day of the holiday, but for you that were lame. For the first day, the wording in the Mishnah is the first day of the holiday. But why does it say that, the first day of the holiday? Not because that's the normal case? Or is it because that's specifically the first day of the holiday? Rabbi Yochanan says it's specifically the first day of the holiday that you would be obligated to bring it. And if you didn't, you have the other days of makeup. Rabbi Shaya says, no, it doesn't mean the first day of the holiday, because specifically the first day of the holiday, it means that normally, you're right, it's the first day of the holiday, but if you're not fit that day, so it would be the first day that you're fit to bring it. That would be the obligation, and the subsequent days would all be makeups. So in other words, it's a little implied from the Mishnah, like subsequent days do have a concept of makeup, and it's only a question of how do we look at as the first day. Now, another reason for Rashi, maybe why he learns this way, is because we did have a Gemara earlier that spoke about the fact that you can't bring Nidarim and Nidavos, you can't bring sacrifices that are not obligatory. We mentioned earlier that there is a limit on what you can bring, which sacrifices, according to Beis Hillel even, that you can't bring just extra sacrifices on the holiday. And what comes out is that the sacrifice of the Chagiga must be that the obligation must be an obligation on the first day of the holiday. And being that it's an obligatory thing, it's not equal. It's not like you could just bring it on the day afterwards, because if you could just bring it on the day afterwards, then maybe you wouldn't be allowed to bring it on the first day. But because the day afterwards is a tashlumen, to make up, that's why you would bring the Chagiga even on the first day of the holiday, because it's more of an obligation on the first day than on the subsequent days. So that might be another source for Rashi. So this is the discussion in the Gemara about the understanding of this concept of tashlumin. Now, Tosfos has a few interesting points here. The first point that Tosfos makes in the tashlumin Tosfos is the Gemara is going to mention that Shavuos also has a makeup time. Now, Shavuos is a one-day holiday. Shavuos is a one-day celebration. The rest of the days that you're making up is learned from Pesach. Pesach, you have 7 days. So the Gemara says that you learn from there that Shavuos also you have all 7 days for makeup. Now, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we don't say Tachum on the month of Sivan until and including Yud Beis, because there's Tashlumin for the Karban Chagiga, and therefore you don't say Tachum. So Tosfos wants to know what would be the law. In other words, we understand there is a makeup, even though it's not a holiday, but there is a makeup that you could do on the day after Shavuos or 2 days after Shavuos. You could do a makeup. Tosfos wonders, he says, would Rabbi Shaya hold the same thing? That if you missed out, let's say you were lame on Shavuos, would you be obligated really in bringing a Chagiga 3 days after Shavuos when you got better? Shavuos is over. The holiday is over. So I understand if you were obligated to bring it on the first day, on the day of Shavuos, and you missed out, guess what? The Gemara explains that Shavuos has 7 days of makeup. Yes, you will need to bring a Chagiga sacrifice on the days subsequent to Shavuos, even though it's not a holiday anymore, but you didn't bring it on the first day, you got to bring it out. But what about if you missed out on Shavuos because you were sick, you were lame, you were exempt? I know the days after Shavuos, we learned from Pesach that it's a makeup and so on. We know about the makeup that you have 7 days to make up, but I'm not really obligated. I was exempt on Shavuos. I was exempt from bringing it. Do I need to make it up? Rabbi Yochanan says for sure not. But even Rabbi Shaya, Tosfos says, the case of Shavuos, it doesn't make sense to say that it'll be tashlumin, that you're going to have to make up for Shavuos, since it's completely weekday. Is Rabbi Shaya really going to hold his law there? Tosfos doesn't seem to think so. Tosfos is basically telling us that there are two laws that are involved here. One law is the concept of makeup, and the makeup law will apply to Shavuos, but the obligatory law that obligates you, according to Rabbi Shaya, that you would be obligated in bringing a Chagiga sacrifice, even if you were exempt on the first day, that law, that obligatory law, would not apply to you on the day, on 2 days after Shavuos, because that's a weekday. We're not gonna give you a new obligation. In other words, there's 2 points to Rabbi Shaya's teaching. Number one is the point that is the same as Rabbi Yochanan, which is that you can do a makeup on the days afterwards. That concept is applicable to Rabbi Shaya as well, just like Rabbi Yochanan. There is makeup for missing out. Rabbi Shaya adds another point, and he says that the first day you're fit, that's the day you're obligated to bring it. The other days are makeups for that day. And that day could be any of the days of the holiday. You would be obligated. The first day you're fit, which would be any of the days of the holiday. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it could only be the first day. Rabbi Shaya says, no, it could be any of the days of the holiday. The first day that you're fit, that's the day that you're obligated. And the subsequent days would be makeups for that day. What about if it's not a holiday anymore? It's a day 2 days after Shavuos, and I became healthy now. Am I going to be obligated to bring now a Chagiga? So Taisus doesn't understand it that way. Taisus understands that the Gemara is saying you could do a makeup if you were fit on the first day, you missed out, you could do a makeup. But are we going to say, we're going to go so far, Rabbi Shaya, we're going to say Rabbi Shaya holds that you have a new obligation of Chagiga when it's not the holiday? The whole concept of the Chagiga is about the holiday. It's not the holiday anymore. We're going to add on you a new obligation to bring a Chagiga when it's not the holiday. If you were obligated before you never did it, okay, we'll let you make up, no problem. But we're going to tell you, celebrate now, time to celebrate. It's not a holiday. Do I really need to celebrate? So that's the first Taisus over here. The next Taisus has a more interesting point, and that is that what would be in the opposite case? That really gets you thinking. What happens if you were healthy on the first day? You were fine. You were obligated to bring the Chagiga. And then the second day comes, and all of a sudden, you become lame. All of a sudden, you had a flare-up of gout and from all the meat. And now, and the wine. And now, your second day, you're lame. You can't walk. You're lame on the second day of Sukkot. So you were obligated on the first day, but what would be the din on the second day when you're exempt because you're lame? Would that exemption kick in? Or would we say that exemption doesn't kick in because your obligation was on the first day, and that day you were obligated, and now you got to do a makeup no matter what. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, the initial thought of Taisvis is that you were obligated on the first day. You didn't bring it. Now you're lame on the second day. So you want to use your doctor's note to exempt you because you're lame on the second day. No, you were obligated. You got an obligation on your shoulders. That obligation on your shoulders, you gotta fulfill. You had an obligation on the first day, and that you never fulfilled. You got to pay it up. Oh, you tell me you're struggling now? Too bad. Pay it up. You had an obligation on the first day. You didn't bring. You should have brought it then. You decided to go to you used up all your money you went to a restaurant and you have no money left. You shouldn't have gone to the restaurant. You were fine 2 days ago when you were supposed to bring it. You were supposed to bring the sacrifice on Sukkot. You didn't bring it. You were obligated. Now you're gonna claim lame. Your obligation is on your shoulders. You have an obligation to bring it. The lame excuse would have worked on the first day. You would say, "Oh, I'm exempt." Okay, you're exempt. Yeah, you're lame. You're exempt. But no, you were obligated on the first day. You didn't bring it. Now you want to claim lame? It doesn't work for a day of substitute. It works for a first day. However, What about Rabbi Shaya? Rabbi Shaya would say, well, you were obligated on the first day. You didn't bring it. What about the other days? So if we learn like Rashi would say that you were obligated on the first day. You didn't bring it on the first day. The next day you want to claim exemption. No. You're obligated to bring it because you were obligated on the first day. And you're all these days are going to be makeups for the first day. They're not going to help you. It's not going to help you being lame. Your obligation is on your shoulders already. You already had that obligation from before. However, if you want to learn the other simple way that was not the way Rashi learned, and you want to learn that maybe Rabbi Shaya is saying every day is like its own obligation, so you may say, well, once I become lame on the second day, I am exempt. Maybe there's a room for exemption now because the fact is, I'm free. I'm exempt. I'm not obligated today. My daily obligation, according to the simple way of understanding the logic of Rabbi Shaya, would be that each day has an obligation to bring this, and it's not a makeup for the first day. It's each day has an obligation. So, okay, I didn't bring it initially, and now I'm exempt. I'm exempt. The exemption kicks in because this is a day of an obligation, but I'm lame, so I'm exempt. I'm going to be exempt. So there's room to say that maybe my exemption would kick in. Now, Taisvis, in the end, he says, you know what? It doesn't matter because the fact is that I'm not obligated to go to the Beis Hamikdash if I'm lame, so I end up being exempt anyway. So Taisvis, in the end, he sort of knocks off this question of this case. Taisvis brought this scenario, which is a complicated scenario, but in the end, he basically pushes it aside and says, doesn't really seem to apply because the fact is you are exempt for an alternative reason. In other words, there's another issue that ends up causing you to be exempt here, and that is that there's a term that we learned earlier that says kol she'enoi bebia enoi behava. Someone doesn't have to come; they don't all have to bring the sacrifice. So, because you're exempt from coming, being lame, you would be exempt from bringing the sacrifice. We spoke about it regarding if someone who's tameh or someone who's an aral, someone who's impure and uncircumcised. So basically, the exemption would kick in here, even though you were obligated on the first day and you didn't bring it, but then you become lame, you're exempt from coming. So that exemption from coming, Taisa says, would apply here as well, that you would be exempt because of this alternative reason. But because of besides for this reason, there would be room to think of Rabbi Shaya that you might be exempt or you might be obligated. And in Rabbi Yochanan as well, there was room to say that you would be obligated in bringing it on the subsequent days of the holiday, even though you are lame, because your initial obligation, you were obligated. So again, this is this Taisvis on the side, and he brings this complicated case where it's sort of like flips the equation over. Okay, well, sorry for going over time. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Have a great Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, everyone. Bye-bye.
Shabbos all.
Shabbos.